Welcome to the show today. We're talking with Pete Matthew, CEO of Jackson's Wealth Management and host of Meaningful Money. Pete isn't your typical advisor. He's netted almost 7 million views on YouTube and 4.5 million downloads of his podcast. And with over 300 leads a year and growing, Pete's biggest problem is keeping up with the demand he's created. Oh, and the big clients he's landed are London bankers, while he's from a little town in the corner of England. Pete shares his story of getting started in content and how it's helped him create a thriving business. We get into the details on this one. We'll talk about topic generation, titles and thumbnails, the first 30 seconds of a video, and retention. We compare podcasting to video production and how he's woven all of it into his business. We also get a look at Pete in the very beginning, and it shows how starting modestly can have really big results. Finally, we talk about creating conversions from all that content and generating leads. This episode is jam-packed. You're not going to want to miss any of it. I learned a lot, and I hope you do too. Pete Matthew, welcome to the Augmented Advisor.
John, thank you for having me, bud. I'm excited to be here.
It's great. I'll tell you what, you are our first international guest from across the pond, and I'm thrilled. This is a global community, and I'm really glad to have you all the way from Cornwall, England.
The very bottom left, southwest of England.
That's right.
10 miles and you fall off Land's End.
Right. Lovely coastline, though.
Beautiful part of the world. I married a Cornish girl. I'm from the north of England, which is a lot less picturesque. Down here, it's a beautiful place to live and to bring up children. So, yeah, we're very blessed to live where we do.
Lovely. And, a little rainy. And you like the weather. Hopefully you like the weather.
Yeah, it's sort of temperate climate. It's probably one of the better climates in the UK, but we're still at a reasonable, is it latitude that way up? So yeah, a lot of rain, but when it's sunny, there's nowhere better on the planet. We have amazing beaches and sort of rural sort of community, which is great. So yeah, we love it. Yeah, it's a great place to be. But I can still do what I do from here, which is amazing. So
amazing. And so let's talk about what you do. So I stumbled onto you, I think, on YouTube, and I thought, who's this guy with a lovely personality and this very sonorous bass voice talking about financial stuff? And I started to look into what you do, and I noticed you've got over 6 million views on YouTube, and started to dig in, and there's the podcast with over 4.5 million downloads. And I started to really enjoy what I was watching, and I thought, I've got to get Pete on the show.
Thank you so much.
So I'd love to talk a little bit about, at a high level, what that's done for your financial advisory business. So you are a practicing advisor, the CEO of Jackson's Wealth Management, as well as the host of Meaningful Money. So I've got to imagine that this really connects to your job as an IFA and running that firm. So talk to me about why'd you start it and what it's doing for your business.
Well, yeah, I've been a financial advisor for 26 years this year. And, I love what I do. I love the fact that we help real people. I actually care not at all about money or investing or about any of that stuff, but I love people. And I love the fact that we get to help people navigate the personal finance system so that they can achieve what they want to achieve in life. That's what sort of gets me out of bed. And, I've been doing that 26 years now, but about sort of 2009, really, 3 things came together that were the trigger for beginning this whole project. One was that I kind of wanted to do and help more people than I could ever do one-on-one. I'm raised by a pastor in the church. I've seen my mom and dad sort of sacrifice endlessly for other people. So I guess there's an element to that in my DNA that I want to help people. Also, my dad was a teacher before he was a pastor. So he is amazing at explaining things and has a wonderful grasp of language. And, I saw that and saw the power of words done well to teach and to encourage and build up people. And that was kind of, in my DNA. And I wanted to help more people than I could do one-on-one. Second thing was that in a bunch of different scenarios in my life, people told me that I was good at explaining things. So I was a governor at my children's school. I was lay preaching in church, and obviously young children then around the table. My wife would say, I never would have thought to have explained it like that, whatever it was, and people just said, you're really good at explaining things, Pete. And that kind of just sort of sunk in, I guess. The third trigger was that I read a book, and the book was Crush It by Gary Vaynerchuk, which I think was written in 2008.
Gary V.
Well, man, he's still one of my all-time heroes.
Amazing.
And essentially the premise of that book, of course, a lot of the mechanics will be out of date now, but essentially the premise is, if you have a message and if you show up and deliver it, and if it's half decent, we now live in a world where there's nobody stopping you getting that message out to the world. You just have to do it. So there's no editors, there's no producers, there's nobody telling you that you're too fat or too northern or whatever. Just get up and do it. And if it's any good, people will show up. So I just thought I'd have a go. So I bought a flip video camera. It's up on a shelf up there, actually, just to remind me where it started. And it's a little, about the size of a packet of cigarettes, right? A little 720-point video camera, and just took it down to the prom, the seafront here in Penzance, sort of attached it by a cable to a fence and said, I'm going to talk about money. I'm going to do videos about money. It was 7:30 in the morning. Nobody was around. And I just thought I'd start. And I taught myself how to edit videos, and we carried on. So that was the trigger really for getting going. It kind of amplifies what I love to do one-on-one with clients, really. So, I did tons of videos. I did nearly 300 videos. Nobody was watching. I wasn't very good at, keywords or titles or thumbnails then. But I began to fall in love with the medium of the podcast. So I was listening to Michael Hyatt, Pat Flynn, Cliff Ravenscraft, these sort of denizens of the podcast world. And I thought, what a great medium. It's longer form, and I can listen to it while I'm walking the dog or cutting the grass or driving to the gym or to the office. What an amazing medium. I should do that. And so I bought a course, actually, by Cliff Ravenscraft, the podcast Answer Man, and learned how to put all the gear together. And in November 2012, started a podcast. Messed around with it for a little bit. But in April 2013, I said, I've got to commit to this and I've got to do it weekly. Come hell or high water, that is what I will do. And it's that was the breakout medium for me, because nobody, particularly in the UK, was doing a personal finance podcast at the time. Nobody. So, I was it. People searched personal finance on iTunes, as it was then. They found me because there was hardly anybody else doing anything. So I had kind of first mover advantage from that point of view, but I kept going. And it's the podcast that has really done wonders for me. That's how people heard of me in the UK, particularly.
Got it.
But my first love has always been YouTube. And so latterly, maybe the last 3 years or so, I didn't do anything on YouTube for quite a few years, except I started filming myself, do my podcast. That was back when it was a lecture show. It was just me. I now have a co-host. So other than that, I didn't do much on YouTube, but I felt the call back. And, I've been doing stuff on YouTube for probably 3 and a bit years now. And that's going great guns. And that's always been my first love. I love to get in front of a camera, first and foremost. As far as what it's done for my business, it's just utterly transformed it. When I began, we were 6 people. I wasn't the CEO then. I was just one of the co-owners. We were 6 people, so 4 advisors and 2 support staff. Work that out if you can. We're now 21 people, 8 advisors, 13 support. It has massively increased the lead flow. I tell people how many inquiries we get. I talk to colleagues at other firms around the UK, and they usually fall off their chair or they say a nasty swear word because they just can't believe the kind of lead flow that we get. And it's also
do tell.
Well, if I'm allowed to tell the story, I was in a sort of group coaching thing, and it was a quarterly thing. And the facilitator was like, what have you been dealing with over the last 3 months since we last met? And they were all saying, really finding it hard to get business, really finding it hard to get leads and inquiries, and not sure what we're doing wrong, and trying to work with solicitors and accountants to get referrals. And I thought, it's coming around to me. And my biggest issue was coping with the lead flow. So I just said, I hate to say it because everybody else is struggling, but we got more inquiries than we can handle. And somebody said, how many are we talking? I said, well, we'd never get less than 1 a day. And the whole room just went, fuck. A very British way, they sort of, So because they just couldn't believe it. So lead flow is great. One of the things it's really done, though, is forcibly increase the technical nature of what we do. So Jackson's, my company, is actually a 50-year-old company, but came out of a 100-year-old company here in Penzance. So it's absolutely part of the fabric of this local community. And because we're on a peninsula, it's a small world, right? Everybody knows everybody. And so our business was on looking after prominent local families and businesses. But because of the podcast and YouTube, I only have licenses to deal with people who are resident in the UK by choice. But now the majority of our clients are from the Southeast. So they're in London, they're mega high earners, lots of them working for international companies. So they have more complex, technically, needs. And so our level of ability has had to sort of rise to meet it. So it's been good for us from that point of view. Finally, I think personally, producing content week after week after week for now nearly 15 years really distills your own thinking. So, somebody asks me a question now about pretty much anything to do with personal finance. I usually have a very, very quick summary way of saying something because I've said it a million different ways and have come to that sort of perfectly distilled answer. Clients love it. My advisors here love it because I teach them a lot of that stuff as well. And that ability to consistently and concisely communicate is, for me, probably the biggest benefit. I realized the irony that was like a 7-minute response. It wasn't very concise, but you get the point.
I absolutely get the point. And actually, that's one of the things that drew me to the content that you produced. It's quite simple. And and when I look at your journey over time, and we're going to talk about that later in the show, we're going to dig in. We're going to review some very big videos for you and talk about how they worked and why they worked. We're going to talk about the difference between your podcasting work and your video work on YouTube and how that hits. And, we're going to get a little further into your story, particularly the creator's journey and more about the business and lead gen. But the thing that really captivated me, particularly with these more recent videos, is the simplicity. And in particular, this, not just the simplicity of the delivery, which was really great, but actually the simplicity of the concept and the hook and I'm explaining, one of the videos we're going to look at together is a big video that just looked at this simple idea of whether I should invest or overpay my mortgage. Nothing complicated. There's no alpha, there's no beta, there's no Greek soup of things. It's quite simple. And it was clear that it resonated with people. How have you developed that muscle to sort of see the simplicity? Now, obviously, some of this is from your background and your parents and watching your dad work, but how has that evolved?
It's evolved from a realization that real people just don't give a shit about alpha and Sharpe ratio and stuff. They really don't care. Once I think any advisor or anybody understands that nobody wants to make money, they want to live well. And making money, building wealth enables that. It's like nobody goes to buy a drill. They want a hole. And so they buy the tool for the job, right? And so I think if you understand that, you just cut to the stuff that 98% of people need to know. And so, I long since come to realize I actually don't care. I don't really care about educating advisors. Most of them are much smarter than me anyway.
I hope really my audience doesn't take that personally.
No, I hope not. We are an amazing profession that does incredible work, and I think it's a vital profession. But what I care about is real people who never learn this stuff. I was speaking to a very small group last night, actually, as we record this, of young farmers. So Young Farmers Club, this amazing association in this country. And I was speaking to the local sort of chapter. And there was me and 7 20-year-olds. So I'm just sitting on the corner of a table, trying to give them everything they need to know about money in 30 minutes. And I said to them, okay, how many of you, the 7 of you, how many ever had a sit-down conversation with your parents about how to manage money? 2 of them put their hands up. So 2 out of 7. I said, okay, right. Well, how many of you remember anything from school or college about how to manage your finances, student debt, credit cards, how to save and how to set a budget. Not one of them put their hand up. And so, we teach kids about sex. We teach kids about Pythagoras' theorem, for crying out loud. But we don't teach them the rudiments of how to live life in a capitalist economy.
Mm-hmm.
And most people don't need complexity. They need to do very few things consistently over time. And that's why, sort of coming back to the distillation thing that I was talking about, I think once you realize that, it forces you to be simple, because there's only so many things you can talk about it. The biggest problem I have is thinking up new ways to talk about the same few things, because it isn't rocket science. So that's what works. There's plenty of people way smarter than me that really dig into all that sort of stuff, and they got bigger channels than me. So there is clearly a market for people really to dig into alpha and, all that sort of stuff, the deep stuff about investing. But it doesn't interest me, and hence I'm not going to do a video on it. So I guess you attract what you want to talk about. You attract people who like what you want to talk about, don't you?
Which is a lovely feature of the medium, right? If
amazing.
You speak about things that you know and care about, eventually you attract people who care about those same things. And there's a lot to unpack there. So the first thing, though, when I heard you talking with the young farmers, was I thought, okay, here's a guy who's got, very wealthy London bankers in the client list, and he's out there talking to a bunch of kids who are farmers. So why do that?
I don't do it often, but yeah, good question. I sometimes ask myself that same question when I got home and it was really foggy and I had to go out even further west. And I must admit, I asked myself that question last night, but because I love talking about this stuff, because of the difference it makes. That's all. There's nothing more to it than that. So, I think as we perhaps look at some of the stats on my YouTube channel in a bit, plenty of people would have given up because nobody was watching for ages. But I do it because I love it. That's really what it comes down to.
So let's talk a little bit about that. So we're going to talk about, let's start with a video where you clearly get a payoff of doing the work. And I'm going to share my screen here and we'll describe this for the listeners. So this is a video about investing or overpaying your mortgage. And we're going to listen to a bit of it here and then we'll pick it apart. So we've got the thumbnail. This is also your thumbnail on this video. It happens to be the first frame as well. So we're going to listen to just maybe 20 or 30 seconds of this and we'll zoom out a bit. All right, here it is.
I did a video recently all about how I invest my own money. There's a link to that video in the description. But in that video, I mentioned that I've been overpaying my mortgage. And there were lots of comments all along similar lines, such as, why are you paying off your mortgage? Wouldn't that money be better off invested? Call yourself a financial advisor? Plus, some guys said I look over 60, which was nice. So let me address the time-honored question. What makes sense, overpaying your mortgage or investing?
All right, I'm just going to hold it there. So there's so much to unpack here. And to be clear, this is a channel right now. You've got just under 100,000 subscribers, but this video has been seen by 328,000 people at this time. So clearly went well beyond your subscriber base. And that's what we're talking about when we're talking about something that's successful, right? You want it to go well beyond your subscriber base. So if you've got 50 people as subscribers and your video gets seen by 150, that's a successful video. All right. So clearly, where'd the idea come from? I mean, you sort of said it, but talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time in the comments section, and I am fortunate, I think, to get a lot of email from listeners. I've been around a long time, doing it a long time, and I have a Facebook group with nearly 17,000 people in it. And we moderate it really heavily. So it's actually quite a nice place to be, actually, online. It's very supportive. Generally, people feel able to ask any question without being made to feel that they're stupid, So 17,000 people, that's a whole lot of content generators. right there. So usually that's my first port of call. I've got nearly 14,000 people on a mailing list as well. So occasionally I'll just email them and say, hey, hit reply and let me know what you want me to talk about. So there's plenty of ways to generate ideas, but still the best way I think is with my clients. It's amazing what they will ask. And if you get a handful of clients in the space of 2 or 3 weeks who are all asking the same thing, that's usually a pretty good idea for a video. So comment section, Facebook group, loads of places to get ideas from.
So you've got this idea. You talked about it. Clearly, you hit a nerve when you were talking about this. You old guy, you.
I know. I'm 49 for the record. I do look 60, but I'm 49.
So you hit this nerve, and how do you think about then making the video? Where do you start?
We start now. We never used to, but we start now with title and thumbnail every single time. So we have obviously an idea, and then I should say, is myself and my partner, Cal. So Cal is short for Kaloyan. He's in Bulgaria. I've never met him in person, but we're seeking to rectify that this year. But we've been working together for 5 years. We were introduced by a mutual friend, basically. I need somebody to help me with editing and spreading the word on social media. We hit it off straight away. We think very similarly, and he's been an amazing partner in the business. So we talk about title and thumbnail first. We'll bandy ideas around. We'll set up a video call, and we're just sort of looking up off screen and just thinking. And then we'll say, how about this? And we have a Notion database where we sort of scrub these ideas, and we can see each other typing. And then eventually maybe that's it. Maybe that's the one. We're thinking about searchability. We're thinking, about keywords, and we're thinking about the thumbnail in conjunction. And very often the words on the thumbnail, if there are any, will speak to the title, but these certainly won't be the same as the title. So these are the things that we're thinking about. Somebody's thumbnail is about the size of a postage stamp on most people, particularly if they're on their phone, which most people are. So it needs not to have too much detail. We need to, grab their attention, because click-through rate is something that we watch pretty carefully. Generally, the videos that do very well have got very good click-through rate, certainly initially.
And so for those who are listening, what I've just brought up on the screen is kind of a view of a typical YouTube homepage. And the thumbnail is the view of the first, well, it's not really the first frame in this format. It is what YouTube shows you as a video, as a depiction of the video, and obviously the title is beneath it. So this is all about getting somebody to actually click. Because if they won't
watch the video if they don't click.
If they don't click, they won't watch the video. And so as I look at your thumbnail, I'm curious. There's a notion in YouTube land of kind of the rule of 3 in terms of designing the visual space on a thumbnail. And I'm wondering if you think about that, because I look at a lot of your thumbnails and it appears to sort of either naturally or by design adhere to that.
Yeah, 2 or 3. So quite often we'll have me to the side and some text to the other side, with me looking thoughtful or mysterious or wise. Or, I'll be making a ridiculous hand gesture, pointing to the text. Sometimes I'll be holding something up, like I have some fake money, like prop money. So sometimes I'll hold that and, set it on fire, or a picture of me with a blindfold and a dart, throwing it at a dartboard to indicate choosing funds, or a needle in a haystack. So, it's broadly the same thing. We spend a lot of time on it, and we do try stuff. But if something works, we will generally repeat it for a few weeks, and then we'll try something different. Yeah. But the rule of thirds, or certainly having sort of 2 sides to it, and having a real person is definitely proven to work. I used to have some beautiful graphics, but never had me on it.
Right.
And believe it or not, people click more when my face is on it.
Yeah, it's amazing, and in fact, we're going to take a look at kind of the evolution of the thumbnail on your journey here a little bit. But if we look at some of the oldest thumbnails, you're quite a nature lover early on. Everything was outside, and it was a thumbnail which was not a graphic you designed. It was just a frame of the video. Mm-hmm. And that's
why nobody watched.
But also this was kind of YouTube at the time, it seems like.
Yes.
And
I think so.
And YouTube's infinite scroll takes a while, but somewhere I want to say around 5 years in, you go indoors and then oh, there we go.
There we
Now
go.
we are about 5 years ago, and you started with thumbnails that are just graphics, not you.
Yeah. Yeah, for the most part, not me. We've actually redone some of them. So on that screen that you're looking at there, towards the bottom there is one that says, should you take your tax-free cash, which is a much more modern style. Well, that's because that video had done very well. So we went back and changed up the thumbnail.
Yes, it really did. It stands out. So that's 100,000 views back at a time when you were getting as little as 365 views for the very next video.
Exactly.
Yeah. And you can really see this evolution. And eventually, I want to say it's 3 years ago or 2 years ago. Oh, look, you started to go with humans.
Yeah.
But not you.
Necessarily me, though.
Not you. And then eventually you recognize you need to bring the handsome and get there. And I'm just going to
well, that area that you're on now, what I'm doing there is essentially recording the podcast. So it's literally just a video of me recording. So I used pretty much the same artwork for the video as I did for the featured image on the podcast. I went through a very brief phase of kind of doing an accompanying short video to the podcast. So some of those are in there. And I went through a period called 5 Minute Friday, which was blatantly stolen from Peter McKinnon's 2 Minute Tuesday. And I love doing those, actually. Very quick, 5 minutes, just something. And that was in addition to the podcast. And that was the kind of hook that got me back into YouTube, really. I did 50 odd 5 Minute Friday videos.
Yeah, absolutely. And now we're going to flip the script a little bit, and we're going to take a look at the newer videos and the big videos, and you can really see the thumbnails have really evolved. They're quite crisp.
Yeah.
They virtually always feature you and one very simple idea that at a glance you can understand, which has clearly been successful and has gotten the clicks through here. On the big video, I'm curious, when we think about that, one of the interesting things to me was in that first 30 seconds. So for those of you who haven't created on YouTube, the first 3 to 5 seconds and then sort of the first 30 seconds are the critical moments for your retention graph. And we can take a look at what a retention graph looks like in a moment. Pete's been kind enough to agree to share. And I notice here that this is a very simple open compared to a lot of other YouTube clips. There's no, big jump cuts. There's not a lot of graphics. It's just you talking. The cuts that you make are just small shifts in perspective. So
slight zooms
in and out. Yeah. And I'm curious how you think about that first 30 seconds in that style versus the more YouTube-ish big jump cuts and what have you.
Yeah, I think it's important for people listening and watching this to understand that, I run a very busy financial advice practice. The YouTube stuff is still a sideline. Now, it's obviously an increasingly important one, but I basically do it in a day a week, but I do have help, as I've said. So my job in that day a week is to write and record primarily, and I do maybe a couple of evenings as well. So I don't have time to come up with super elaborate intros and outros and editing hooks and chops, really. So I think really what you want to do with that 30 seconds is to honor the promise you made in your thumbnail and title. So if I waffle for 30 seconds, I did one video and I did almost like a little vlog style thing. It was fine. He showed me like in sort of sped up, almost like a time lapse thing of me setting up my cameras and stuff. But, I wasn't delivering on the promise. People had to sort of wait for like 45 seconds before I even started talking about the subject of the video. And, I didn't go down very well. I had some comments about that. So I thought, I'm not going to do that again. That first 30 seconds, very often I will use the words of the title of the video in my first sentence or two. So people know they've clicked the right one. They know they're going to get what they were promised. And that leads to better retention.
So let's look at what retention looks like, because, for those of you who haven't created a lot on YouTube, you catch them early and people fall off very quickly. That's why we're talking about these first 30 seconds in most videos, it is a very, very, very steep decline. And in videos that don't work,
Yes.
you can lose 60, 70, 80% of those who click in that first 30 seconds. So, Pete, I'm wondering if you can show us what a retention graph looks like.
So hopefully you can see that okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so this is a retention graph. So we've got time along the bottom and then sort of viewership, starting obviously right at the start with essentially 100%. And as we go through the video, and I can do that by scrubbing through the actual video at the top there, we can see what percentage of the people who started watching the video are still watching at various time points. So if I go to about 30 seconds in, which is about there, with this video, 71% of people are still watching that started watching. So I haven't, I've only lost 30%. That's actually a pretty good video.
And what's that timestamp? That's about 8 minutes?
That's 30 seconds
30
in out of an
seconds,
8-minute 20 video. So it's an 8-minute 20-second long video. That's 30 seconds. I've got a 71.1% retention rate. So that's pretty key. If you lose a lot in that first 30 seconds, as you say, John, it's not going to be a winning video. But you can see thereafter, it's pretty steady. Most people, even at sort of 2/3 of the way through, more than half of the viewers that started watching it are still watching it. And even right at the end, just before we go to the outro, we're still sitting on about 35%. So 1 in 3 have watched it essentially to the end. And that's, believe it or not, a pretty well-performing video.
That's fantastic.
So,
I mean, based on everything I've seen. And,
that's why it's my 3rd best video
absolutely.
ever.
And again, for folks, I'm going to share, a terrible retention graph, and really what a lot of retention looks like when you're me, and you're not as good a creator as Pete. And you can see here that in the first 30 seconds that I am down to, 45% at 29 seconds. So this is that's what a poor video looks like. And you can see from there, the retention doesn't look very different than Pete's video.
No,
but,
that's right.
But if you don't keep them through that first 30 seconds, obviously they're not going to make it to the end. So it's a really critical way to think about it. And I'm curious if you ever think about your podcast in the same way. Now, people consume podcasts differently, but how would you compare how you think about the opening of a podcast and retention, et cetera? Because we don't have that kind of data on a podcast.
No, we don't. A podcast, obviously, we're in the age of streaming now, but for a long time, a podcast was simply a mechanism for delivering an MP3 file to a phone or an iPod, right? So once that file's delivered, you have no way of knowing whether it's been listened to or how long it's been listened to. So we tend not to get those kind of stats. We know how many downloads we've had. We do not know how many listens we've had. Now, that is changing with streaming. But still, the vast majority of people listen to a podcast that has been downloaded to their phone. It's definitely changing, but still, for me, certainly. So we don't have that sort of need to retain early on. And I think with a podcast, generally people settle in a bit more because usually, and the magic of the podcast medium is that they are doing something else at the same time. So it's not like they've got all eyes on a screen, and if it's not immediately captivating, they're going to click away. It's, they're walking the dog and they're with you. You're there for the duration of the dog walk. You're keeping them company. And so they don't switch off as a rule. Certainly I don't. So partly I think I've just got to use myself as my own listening habits as an example. It's only if I only turn a podcast off if the audio isn't great or something is grating about maybe somebody's voice or whatever. That's generally what it comes down to.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And for me, I do find myself skipping. A lot of the big commercial podcasts will open with a commercial and I'm going to go right by that. But once I'm hooked, I'm in for minutes and minutes and minutes. I give a podcast a lot more of a chance to make an impression than I do with a video.
Yeah, me too. I don't think we should abuse that, though. I still think, obviously, we should get to the meat as quickly as possible. So myself and my co-host, Roger, now, we might banter back and forth for maybe a minute. We don't have adverts, so maybe a minute we'll banter back and forth, and then we'll get straight into it. and that seems to go down well.
And so we looked at that evolution of your thumbnail, but on the video style, I also, I'm fascinated by your early videos, because there are a couple of things that I noticed. I know you're laughing, and
that's one word for it. Fascinated. Yeah, I'm horrified, but there we go.
All right, we are going to horrify you yet again. So, but I do want to take a look at one of your early videos and listen a bit, because there's a couple of things here that stood out to me and that I think are kind of important lessons. So we'll just listen to a few seconds of this.
Oh my gosh.
Meaningful Money. I'm in beautiful woods. Can you see the bluebells behind? All looking very pretty. So far deserted, but on a public footpath, there's every chance I'm going to get disturbed, but never mind. I have notes with me as well today because I got some numbers which I can't retain up here. Now, this is the third principle, if you like. I've called them foundations up to now. I think I'm going to change that, though. The principle, bedrock of financial planning. We've had begin with the end in mind. We've had spend less than you earn. And the third and final main principle, really, is to harness the power of compound interest.
So I'm going to stop there.
Is that a dog in the background?
There's
a dog barking in the background.
There's a dog barking in the background. There's wind noise in the audio. It's probably 480p in terms of quality. But you know what?
Probably. That camera was 720, but it wouldn't always upload. I didn't have the power in my laptop to edit at that kind of resolution.
And you look at the first 30 seconds. Okay, so we are not getting right into it, right? We're 37 seconds in before
we're talking about bluebells.
Before we talked about anything. but the one thing that, and I think that this is why you work now. The one thing I look at there, you're just talking to the camera, and for me, that immediately jumped out. You're not reading from a script. You're not trying to be professional. You're just trying to explain something. And there, to me, and I there was 995 views on this one, which back in those days was actually a pretty good video for you. And I thought, okay, like I get why Pete's successful now. And so I'm curious, very early on, it appears you've got comfort on camera. A lot of people struggle with that. How'd you think about it to get over that hump so quickly, so early in the progress?
I've never been uncomfortable speaking in front of people. I don't know why
Pete, that's not very helpful.
I'm really sorry. I know. You do get better, obviously. And I do think for me, part of it was there is literally no pressure on you if nobody's watching. Or in my case, there's no pressure on me because this was a hobby. I had literally at this point, so this is what, 2010 that video went up? What does it say?
13 years ago.
13 years ago. So, I was doing this for fun. I'm not even sure the words content marketing were coined in 2011. They may have been. But I had no idea that's what I was doing. And so that takes all the pressure off, right? If I'm not sort of hanging my business on this and, it's let's hope this video goes well or else I'm going to be bankrupt in 3 months. There's none of that pressure. So I can, just do what I wanted to do, which was to set up a camera, in that case, in a random woods near my house, stand about half a mile away from the camera and just talk to it. Literally all I'm doing is recreating what I do with clients, really. And so it didn't feel like any kind of pressure. And I realize that's not helpful. For those that do find it difficult, if you are a practicing financial advisor, you spend your days explaining things really well to your clients. And this is no different. So really just don't overthink it. Imagine you got a client in the room with you and you're just explaining to the camera how you would to them. And you'll be fine. These days, I script and I have an auto cue. So I am much more concise now than I was then. And I do all my editing as I write. And I continually refine what I'm saying. And that also takes the pressure off.
Yeah. Although, there's a whole other skill there, right? Because working with auto cue, translation, teleprompter, that requires a lot of practice to not sound like you're reading. And you
Yeah,
definitely
not to have
don't.
your eyes scanning back and forth. Thank you. It is practice. And I've done hundreds of videos like that. When I used to do the podcast solo, I would write them longhand. So I would have the script in front of me and I would read it for the most part, but I just developed the skill of reading in a way that didn't look like I was. And I got pretty good at having my camera just off screen so that I would talk to the camera and then just remember where I was. And it's almost like a intake of breath, look down, but what I'm actually doing is checking the script and then back up to the camera. And it is just practice, John. There's no magic bullet, I'm afraid. But now, yeah, I've developed the ability to read very well and naturally. I have a foot pedal as well, so I can stop the auto cue if it goes too fast. So these are just the little things that you learn to make your life as easy as possible. Because I'm busy, I've got a whole load of other stuff to do. I mean, you can't really see, but the room I'm sitting in is set up so that I can shoot a really great quality video and have that going in less than 10 minutes. I should say for anybody listening to this that I completely messed up my setup for this recording and John had to wait on me for about a quarter of an hour while I sorted my life out. But normally my stuff is set up all the time. I'm surrounded by a kind of scaffolding cage with lights and microphones on it. So I can just press 2 buttons and I'm ready to go. So that's been years of trying to be more efficient, get better at my craft. But I would never have done that if I didn't love it, because for years, nobody was watching.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things that I think are they're really important lessons. So the first one for me is this idea of reminding advisors that they do this every day with their clients. And that reminded me of our friend Gary Vaynerchuk, because Gary's whole thing about content creation is document, don't create. And
love that.
And for me, for financial advisors trying to get started, the best thing you could possibly do is actually have a conversation with another human being and simply record that. And that will feel much more natural than doing what I'm doing right now, which is speaking into a camera. I'm not even looking at Pete. Well, it looks like I'm looking at Pete and looking at you, but I'm looking into a camera. That feels very unnatural at the beginning. But if you can set yourself up to just talk to and look at another human being, a lot of things will go better. And I think you wind up giving people a feeling that you're giving them a sample of what you do with a client. So it's like a free preview.
Yeah.
Which I also think is some of the magic of what you do, Pete.
Yeah, definitely. You know what? We never have to convert anybody that inquires about working with us, because they already know how we work. They already know how we think, because they know how I think, because I preach it. So unless I'm lying every week on a video, and that would become evident very quickly, you know, they know what they're getting. And so we never have to pitch. We never have to sell. By the time they come to us, they've already read a bunch of information about how it will work, what it will cost them. And they come knowing all that. And they're just like, yeah, when can we start? Which is amazing. But what it does, I think as advisors, we forget what a massive amount of trust it takes for somebody to walk through our doors or pick up the phone and get in touch to work with us. You know, I sometimes think we'd far rather talk about sex and death than about our money, right? And so for somebody to walk into a strange office with somebody they've never met, you know, they don't talk to their kids about their money, so why would they talk to a stranger? And we forget that sometimes as advisors, because we do it every single day. So anything we can do to put them at ease in advance. And it's of great pride to me that people say to me reasonably frequently, you are no different in real life than you are on camera. I thank God for that. It would be a catastrophic failure if I was different. So don't put a persona on. Don't try and be something you're not. Be yourself and it will be authentic. Yeah, another thing Gary Vee says, you know, be true to yourself, be authentic. And because it shows, we can sniff out a facade.
Humans are very good at that.
Very easily.
And seeing discomfort, right? Because whenever we try and be something we're not, it's, oh God, it's small little micro cues in your body language and the cadence of your speech and just everything. It comes out. You're simply not you, and people do not respond to inauthenticity. I need to practice saying that, apparently. But the other thing I think has got to be music to new creators' ears as an advisor is I never have to sell. I never have to convert, because if you go down this media road, people know you before they show up, or they feel like they do. They're already have a sense of what they're buying because they're buying you.
The first ever client that is super powerful. And I remember the first time I became aware of that. So in the August of 2011, so I had been shooting videos for about 18 months, something like that. And an email came into my inbox out of the blue at work, so my Jackson's email address. Dear Pete, we have watched several of your videos. And actually what he did is he gave me almost his entire life story and his financial position in an email. Don't ever do that, folks. Right? So he put it on an email. And at the end of it, he said, look, having watched several of your videos now, we feel like we know you and can trust you, full stop. Will you work with us? ? And I nearly fell off my chair. I just went, wow, oh, God. He has no idea if he can trust me or not. I could be the greasiest charlatan, but something about the way I put myself across online resonated with this guy. And he lives 350 miles away from my office here. And I thought, this actually is powerful. Maybe there's something in this. And I kept going. But now I've got a realization this could actually do great things for me in my business. And, you know, and that was the first of what is now, you know, 300 inquiries a year easily. So, you know, it's a great place to be. But that authenticity and bridging the trust gap in advance is super powerful. It makes life a lot
easier. It's one of the hardest things financial advisors need to do. I mean, never mind simply reaching that many people, but developing enough trust that they'll share those details and that they'll take your advice, which is another thing. I feel like advisors have to work so hard to develop enough of a relationship that their clients will actually take their advice and do what they're asked to do for their own benefit.
Yeah. Yeah. But again, if there's consistency of the message that they get beforehand, they're kind of expecting what you're going to tell them to do, and they've already reconciled themselves with it. So we are passive investing, you know, market tracking Jack Bogle fans here. And I preach that on the podcast and on YouTube as well for the majority of people. I don't think there's anything wrong with active management, but I think for the vast majority of people, just track the markets. It'll be fine. Big fan of J.L. Collins, Simple Path to Wealth. And if then somebody was to come here and be recommended a fully active portfolio, that would be such a jarring disconnect. Nobody would say yes.
Absolutely.
So just keep it consistent.
And so you talked about there another area that I think our listeners, our viewers are going to be really interested in, which is the lead gen, the conversion. So, you know, how did you start to think about conversion more systematically? Because clearly just getting an email out of the blue, while great, does not equal a conversion machine. So how did you start to develop, you know, specific conversion mechanisms, and you know, what are they from, say, the videos or the podcasts, or how does that work?
Sure. One of the best things I did was start to build an email list. So there's about 13,500, maybe a little more, closing in on 14,000 on my email list. So you build that by providing value. So if I did a video on a particular subject, maybe how to decide whether you consolidate different pension plans into one, say, I gave them a checklist of questions to ask of their existing pension providers to see if there was any reasons why they should not consolidate. And it's just a simple checklist. It's a one-page PDF, but it's in return for their email address. Mm-hmm. We never spam them.
And that's a link usually in the video description. Is that how that works?
Yes. Yeah. Or in the podcast, I will give obviously there's show notes with the podcast. So there's a page dedicated to that episode and the link's in there. And so that works really well. You build a list that way and you provide value that way. So I do have a couple of email sequences that go out. So people self-select, are they very much just getting started, need to learn how to budget and pay off debt and that sort of thing? Or are they a bit past that and they're looking how to build wealth, and they self-select and then they get a sequence of emails, 10 emails over 10 days. Lots of feedback from that. So, I mean, this whole sort of funnel and conversion thing, John, has evolved massively. Again, please remember, for the first, I don't know how many years, I had no idea that this was marketing. Not really. Even when that first client came in, I thought that's a nice accident. yes, this maybe shows what's possible, but I didn't have the time or the inclination really, or understanding to how to maximize it. It's really since my relationship with Cal, who's my partner now, he is the one who has really sort of, he's like a Pat Flynn disciple. And so he, just embraced all that sort of stuff and brought that to Meaningful Money. So we will, for example, lead magnets, I do a Friday email, right? So it's just called the digest. It's very simple. It's like, here's some stuff I've been thinking about. Here's what garbage I've been watching on YouTube. Here's a picture of the week. And yeah, that's basically about it. It used to have more stuff in. People absolutely love it. I have nearly a 60% open rate.
Big. That's going to beat anyone's market commentary newsletter.
Oh, nobody gives a toss about that. I wouldn't read it, so why do I expect my listeners and viewers to read it? I might read something because I have to, but I'm cursing my life as I'm reading that crap. Nobody wants to read it. So why would I don't want to attract people who like reading that stuff. It's because they're really dull. I shouldn't say that. That's very rude of me. I'm sorry.
I can't commit to editing that out, however.
No, I don't care either. So, I want to attract people like me. And so, I'll share a daft picture of my dog on a really wet walk, and people love it. I get tons of replies. I'm a bit of a heavy guy. I've shared my sort of issues with weight loss and stuff like that. And I get so many great comments and have you tried this and all that sort of stuff. People care, right? And you have a kind of conversation, and I try to reply to as many as I can. But what it's become, this whole funnel thing, is essentially now there are 3 levels to my business. So we have the free tier. So that's the YouTube channel and the podcast. So, and I hold nothing back, not really. Everything's done for free. So people can just consume that the rest of their life. I got a book deal out of it. So I've written 1 book and there's another one on the way next year. And that's the free tier or very low cost, right? And then I wanted something in between that and full regulated one-on-one financial planning advice. And so this is Meaningful Academy. And so I started listening to a couple of podcasts, one by the membership guys, but also was hearing about Pat Flynn membership sites. He did something, I can't remember, it was like a membership challenge where he set up a membership site from scratch, and it was about food trucks. And I listened to his whole series about that and how he built it and how he marketed it and how he got members. And then I think he ended up selling it. It was a proper business. And so I thought, okay, I wonder if I could do something like that and have essentially a more distilled version of what I give away for free, so people can really make rapid progress quickly without having to search through stuff. And so Meaningful Academy has 3 tiers. It has a foundations tier, which is now free. So that is how to budget, how to get out of debt, the basics of protecting your family, all that good stuff, right? Then there's build wealth and retirement planning. 3 phases. It's a bunch of video lessons. There's 40 or 50 videos in each of those phases. And I give them access in the upper 2 tiers to a financial planning tool called Voyant, which I know is available in the US. It's a big deal here in the UK. I've used it for 15 years, and I teach them how to use it so they can do their own financial planning. And that's a real hook. It's a one-off cost. So I don't have to commit to continually doing new content every month. It's a one-off cost. They buy it, they get it, that's it. The only recurring thing is the Voyant renewal every year, which is 120 quid a year. But that now makes me somewhere in the region of £150,000 a year. So, that's a shit ton of money that I never had, and enables me now to pay for, Cal, who does incredible work. He gets a cut of that and deserves it. Enables me to change the equipment and all that sort of stuff and just develop the business. And that's kind of the middle tier now. And of course, the top tier, if you think of it as a pyramid and not a funnel, the top tier is one-on-one regulated financial planning, which is expensive because it's really good. And you'd be amazed how many people come all the way through. So they watch the videos, listen to the podcast, they buy the academy, they do all the work, they build their own financial plans in Voyant, and then they send an email saying, "Oh, brilliant, Pete, we love your stuff. Any chance we could just engage with you to check our planning?" I'm like, "Yes, we can." And we love it. So we get super engaged clients we love to have sort of, oh gosh, the word escapes me, collaborative relationships with our clients. We don't want clients who just like, whatever you say, Pete, we trust you. That's fine. We love to teach and we love to empower our clients. So if we got clients who have gone through that journey and they've consumed all my stuff, done a whole load of stuff, taken radical action for themselves, but at the end of it, they just say, look, there's some big decisions here. We'd love to have a professional look over it, make sure we're not missing anything. And we're not going to obviously go to anybody else but you. I mean, it's the perfect model.
Anyone who's listening to this who doesn't have their mind blown as a financial advisor, the thing here is, right? So to me, the innovation is that you've parked a creator-oriented business model in the middle of a financial advisory business. And it's huge value added for your client, your prospective clients, and for your audience. And it's made possible because you have an audience, right? It's the power of audience that makes that all possible. And any advisor who isn't running out to try and figure out how to do this, who's not Googling or YouTube searching, how do I build a course, I think might be insane. That really is the holy grail. It's a lot of work though. And a lot of work to build that content, and even more work to build the audience. But it's a magic carpet once you've got it done.
Oh man, it really is. And that's why now, I say we have 1 inquiry a day. We've had 10 in the last 4 days.
I dare any advisor to put in the comments that they've gotten more than that.
Well, maybe they have. I don't know. But we are a provincial firm in the back end of the UK. We are not in London, right? People don't walk past our office. So, there's no way I could have built what we're building without this content marketing stuff. It is a lot of work, but it's also easier than ever to do. I mean, the tools, I built a membership site in 2014 for advisors. And then I realized that I like ordinary people a bit more than advisors, and I didn't really want to put time into
audience,
it.
Take
and
no
I never
offense.
had more than about. And then I don't dislike advisors. I just like ordinary people more. But then I had to. I built the site myself, and I had to learn how to do it and get the sort of gateway software that could take payments, and I taught myself how to do that. The reason why I think I've kept going so long is that I actually get a real kick out of figuring out how to do stuff. And so, because plenty of people would have given up, but now it's easier than ever. I mean, these are off the shelf. You got Kajabi or Circle or School or any of these amazing systems where you literally just upload the video and the rest is done for you. I mean, that's amazing. I didn't have that to start with. I've just had the Academy site completely rebuilt by people smarter than I am. So now it's much more robust, much better looking and all that. So it's an amazing business, and it is a funnel, despite me not really knowing what that was when we started out. So I feel very blessed, John, but it's by consistency and sort of dogged determination to try and learn how to do stuff. And also listening to things like this show, you and I now. Hopefully people listening to this will be like, oh, that's a good idea. How can I learn more about that? And I've had definitely a kind of relentless interest in online marketing, fueled in no small measure by Gary Vee.
Phenomenal. And just for folks who are watching, and I may post this in social media, let's look at that graph you showed me before the show of the YouTube journey, the full, here's what it looked like. If you can share that, because the consistency part of this is really critical. And this won't be to frighten anyone, but this does really require just consistent effort over time. And yes, you have to get better each time. Where's that graph of total views that we were looking at?
So this is a slightly sort of expanded version.
Yeah, there it is.
There it is. If I perhaps make it a bit bigger on the screen for people. So this is the lifetime views on my channel, right? And this
6.5 million
22nd, 2010.
For those who aren't seeing this.
6.5 million. And, basically the line is flat until 2019. So it's like 9 years later. The line is flat. I'm getting 100 views a day, 91 views a day, from 2010 to 2019. And then I had, it sort of started to get maybe 250, maybe 300, but it didn't get much better than that. We're starting in 2020 to get to 700 video views a day. And then, I really sort of started properly taking it seriously. And the overpay or invest video that we talked about earlier, John, is around about this time.
Right. That your consistency over time plus that video seemed to have really broken you out.
That was the one, yeah. That one called Pension versus ISA, which is just comparing the two biggest tax efficient accounts in the UK. And one simply called Pensions Explained UK, which is, textbook
Absolutely.
SEO. And those three are the biggest by far.
So the payoff though is phenomenal for this level of consistency, and I think that's the message that folks should take away. And as we start to wrap, I'm wondering what right now is inspiring you in your continued creator's journey. Are there a book or a podcast or anything that in particular that's sort of helping you learn and further the craft?
Great question. I should say, by the way, just before I answer that, if you start today, you don't have to wait 9 years for it to pay off. Okay. I had no idea what I was doing for a long time. So I think if I was starting now, knowing what I know now, then I would have done better more quickly.
And there are more resources available to learn this.
Yes.
Shows like this and much better, but plenty of shows that talk about how to get further faster, right? Even just the idea that you'd think hard about if you're doing video, you'd think hard about your title and thumbnail and first 30 seconds. Even that little bit of wisdom didn't exist 10, 15 years ago, 5 years ago. No one was really talking about this. So there's a lot of opportunity to get there a lot faster today.
I have lots of heroes. Gary Vee remains just consistent. I love Gary Vee's message that you just need to care. You need to care about the people who are consuming your stuff, about other people generally. In what is a very aggressive, selfish world, caring about others is actually a superpower, and it stands out a mile. So that might sound very sort of liberal to a lot of people, but Gary Vee just embodies that, and I love it. I'm a big fan of a guy called Ali Abdaal.
Fantastic. Talk about him.
Brilliant creator. Yeah, love that guy. So he was a doctor, he was a student doctor, and while he was studying to be a doctor, set up a business to teach others medical students, and did very well while he was studying. Graduated, I think I'm right in thinking he was either top of his class or very close to the top of his class, from Cambridge. Very top at Cambridge. So this guy's a smart cookie, right? And, was a doctor for a couple of years, but has become known as the sort of guru really on productivity. And there's, now interviews incredible people on this podcast. So I love Ali, and I've been following him since he had about 250,000 subscribers, and he's now just gone through 5 million. Just had a book out called Feel Good Productivity, which is excellent. Not your classic productivity book, but really, really good. So I love Ali Abdaal. I love Peter McKinnon. There's a lot of YouTubers seem to be bailing. They seem to be burning out. But Peter McKinnon has kind of reinvented himself a little bit like Madonna, she kept changing sort of form. I think Peter McKinnon's doing that as well. And I just, love his stuff. I've always been a fan of Casey Neistat. So now none of these have anything to do with personal finance, right? But they are true to themselves and they just love creating. You can tell that. For advisors, there's a podcast here in the UK, and they also put it on YouTube, called Trap, the Real Advisor Podcast. And a couple of friends of mine are on there, and there's a couple of other guys as well. And they basically just riff about what it is to be a financial advisor in the UK, the sorts of things we have to deal with as clients. That's great value, and any advisor should listen to that, even if it's UK based. Most of it's universal. In fact, one of the guys on there is from the Republic of Ireland, which is not the UK, in case you don't know your geography, this side of the pond. And, these are the ones, I think probably it's hard for me to I couldn't pin it down to a single. The biggest influence by far has been Gary Vee, closely followed by Pat Flynn and Michael Hyatt. But probably the book that's changed my life the most was Getting Things Done by David Allen. It taught me just how to be productive and try to capture things before I lose them out of my mind and all that sort of stuff.
We will link to all of this in the show notes. Pete, we're at time, and it's been a great conversation. I really appreciate you sharing your wisdom. And thank you very much for being on the Augmented Advisor.
John, it's been an absolute pleasure and a blast.
We
Had fun,
have.
haven't we? Let's do this again. Look, I'd love to hear from people. So if people want to sort of reach out and email me, they can do that.
That'd be great.
I'll send you, just email me, pete@meaningfulmoney.tv. Just send me an email. I'd love to hear from people.
All right.
So thanks for having
Thank
me,
you.
mate. Really had fun.